And then when it comes to lead generation, there's something incredibly powerful about it. And I don't know how common the word arbitrage is in this ecosystem, but there's something really, it's sort of this delicate balance between two sides. You have advertisers who are paying on a performance basis, but then you also have, sort of the marketers or the sellers or the generators who in many cases have to take a lot of risk in order to generate that particular lead. So they may be buying media or building out deep content, but there's a lot of time and money invested in getting that lead. And so both parties are sort of taking, take some risk, but because the sellers, the traffic generators, usually have to take a lot of financial risk, that's what sort of leads to, I think, the reason why we're here today is how do we, keep that sort of sense of trust strong. And in the United States, there's sort of this, and I think I've been asking, Laurent and, Clément all these questions and Eric, because trying to understand the, sort of the French culture. And I think one of the things that has come to mind, and I don't know if this is common here, but in the US, there's a saying that it's easier to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. And so I think there's sort of this, I'll take a risk, I'll do something a little bit aggressive and a little bit, more than I should. And then if I get caught, it doesn't really matter. And that's what we continue to try to sort of, kind of stamp out. And what this is sort of saying is that in the past, at least in the earlier days of the digital, for an internet marketer to take risk, what was involved was, a blend of, sort of technology. If you think about the early days of paid search, some of the best, marketers you've met were some of the earliest people who built technology to help them figure out how to do keyword selection, campaign grouping, and optimization, or it was their own versions of A/B testing. So there was technology, and today I think because it's the platforms have become complex, they've become very saturated. There's a lot more money involved. A lot of what happens for the people who are taking risk is that they just rely too much on being clever, because being clever is how they get people's attention. But it's that being clever that can also lead to some things that make it long-term a little bit challenging. So continuing with this theme of the traffic, we have this parallel idea that years ago at least, where a person who was taking media risk could be, they could buy traffic from a lot of different sources, and they were very open to it. I would like to think that everyone in this room has seen like bad examples of affiliate marketing or bad examples of marketing that are out there. And it used to be that they could do a lot of stuff and every site was open to them. And today it's very difficult, it's a lot harder, and therefore they have to, and they end up playing in an area that is not as, sort of where the traffic isn't as good. And I say all this not in any sort of negative way, but when I think about putting it in terms of, myself in terms of being an advertiser, and you're getting either a lead or you're getting a call, it's always, in an ideal world, the person was referred to you by a friend. And then in sort of the next step, it's, they know who you are, they want to be with you. But in this sort of the world, and this is sort of especially true in the US web, in the world of scale and give me more and give me more and give me more, it's that you hit a certain point where you go from enough to you have to really work at it, and in order to really work at it, you end up getting a whole bunch of stuff that you don't really want. Complicating matters worse for, I think for all of us, is this notion at least, and we've talked about it already. I believe that the guys from APLI Media, when they talked about the call world and sort of touched on it, that we really have a world that's more mobile than desktop. Now I think, so the first part was really intended to sort of set the groundwork for what is it that a lot of the, sort of how is the internet traffic out there? How do people get access to it? And this was some people's favorite slide when they previewed it. But this is, for me at least, and maybe it's my own sort of perverse fascination that's out there, it's this idea of how do we as a group and how do we as, come together to fight what is this? And so I'm going to share some examples of what happens when businesses really, really want traffic and there's just not a lot of it. There's not a lot of great stuff out there. So if, what do people do to try and kind of manufactured demand in a way. And I call this the old way because this is very much desktop, and this is an example that was very common during 2008 to 2010 in the US. I learned that sort of for-profit education is sort of a concept in France, which is, sort of doesn't exist. And luckily, it means that no one in this room has probably gone through this site, so fantastic. And in this case, so it's interesting, you clicked on an ad that said, I'm interested in a job, and there's a job in your area. And so what happens, you come into this landing page, and it says, we have found jobs in your area. If you're in the mindset of someone who wants a job, you probably will go ahead and start filling out the form. But it's very unclear what this is. And we think about, and there's always a small little, kind of thing at the bottom that no one really reads anyway. And so, here you are, and they take you through sort of a very typical funnel. And it's, take a look, and nothing has to do with anything. It's always very small. Would you like an unlimited club subscription if you're something? And so, what percentage of the people, though, would look at this and say, they're in a hurry to get to what they want, and so what would they do? They'll probably put in their phone number, and they'll probably say submit and continue, versus knowing that very small up on the right-hand side is a little button that says skip. Even if you figure out skip, you're going to go to yet another page, and it's going to ask you for even more stuff. And then you'll go to yet another page, and I think I even took out a couple pages in here. And all of this, yes, it's a lot of fun, a lot of good quality leads here. And then finally, which is sort of my favorite part, is where do they land you? They land you on a page that is results that you could find at a site that you could navigate to yourself. So at least I see one head nod that, and so it's a very sort of devious thing where you can figure out and say, because it costs me money to get traffic, how do I basically insert myself in between what a user wants and try to, it sort of reminds me, I don't know if here, like at a grocery store, it always reminds me of you're in the checkout line and they stick stuff next to you on the side that you may or may not need, but they're hoping that maybe you're sort of in market for that thing that you didn't know you needed. And so today in sort of the, kind of in the mobile first world, it's still slightly, a lot of it's the same and a lot of it's different. So this example is, I don't know how many people here are playing, sort of games, but if you play a game and you don't really want to put in your payment information, you'll notice that there's, and this has existed in many, sort of forms, but you'll see earn 99 gold. And it's, so, how many people are sitting there and they want that gold, they want to go to the next level, and so they say, fine, instead of paying for it, I'll do this. And you'll have to notice some very clever photography here. It's the, oh my gosh, there's something, it's probably just as good as playing the game, right? So then you go to the landing page, and this is sort of one of my favorite things, and this is what I struggle with all the time, because I personally, it's sort of this constant tension that we try to fight and we try to keep in check. And it's, and I think some of it is just, this is what happens when you try to fill an insatiable demand and you don't have, sort of like the parties talking from the very, very beginning. But I don't know how many people can read this, but there are certain things that are just amazing. For instance, it's the government is forcing drivers to purchase auto insurance. It sounds so awful. The government is forcing you to purchase, but I don't think anyone, has ever thought it was a bad thing to get insurance. And then it's sort of, oh look, there's this one trick. It's truly evil genius. And so it's adapted now for a mobile experience. You'll notice trying to tell you what to do, the little finger on the side to sort of tap. And the process in this case is, it's sort of been optimized for this, but imagine trying to, again, this is really cumbersome. This is really difficult to do. It's not really fun whatsoever, and yet you're going to continue doing this because, why? Because you really want your gold at the end. And then you'll notice sort of on the very last page, a couple seals for social, like to make it feel even more trusted. And then finally, you get to what ultimately can still be a very bad user experience, which is we can't do anything for you. But don't worry, there will be another link right down there that will take me to some other funnel to go ahead. And so, I have nothing better to do, it seems, during most of my days than to capture stuff that looks interesting that I may want to use in the future. I get really lucky to be here because otherwise I wouldn't know what to do with this photo from 2008. So I'm really happy that I get to use it. And this is, you think about what happens, the channels open and people who are in a performance marketing environment sometimes start to figure out, how do I figure out how to get impressions and how do I get clicks? And so here was a great one where it was, I think this one was a friend of my wife's, and so her account was presumably, sort of hacked in some way. And then, of course, it was, kind of, you gotta love this and just remember to move the space. And then so this is from, sort of 2012, again, people getting sort of creative to figure out how do we get you and how do we talk to you. I thought this one was really funny because it was, clearly if there was any intelligence here, you're not going to tweet at LeadCampus about getting a mortgage, but it just goes to show you. And then I don't know how many people have used any of the messenger apps, but I'm always amazed when you find how these old models are adapted for a brand new sort of generation. So here we are, messaging app Kik. I get this message from Hunter, and I love it. It's sort of, like tap to reveal. Cool, I wonder what Hunter sent me. And it turns out that he sent me a chance to get Google Glass for free. Who doesn't want that for free? So of course, I'm gonna go click in. And then you'll see, it's amazing. It's the exact same sort of incentivized path that you might have expected from years ago, adapted slightly. And so I went ahead and took a few more screenshots of the path, and you'll see that, you type it in, you gotta love it, the little alert box comes up. And then, of course, it's, well, great, now even though somewhere it says you don't have to do it, of course, they're gonna make you have to do it. And so I actually went in and tried, sort of tried this and played this game, and then I tried to come back, and of course it didn't ever work. So it's so I say that, and there are other things that I think we have to battle as well, and I say this as one that's on the advertiser side, and that is I think that we will oftentimes sort of hear that it gets cheaper over time, and I know so many advertisers always wonder, well, if I spend more money with you, why is my cost per lead, why does it not go down? And I'd say for the last 12, 14 years, this has held true, that the actual cost to generate a lead, it's much more like a resource, like a precious resource. And so it always gets a little bit more expensive over time. And this is another one that we sort of will, kind of this constantly hear and have to battle. And that's, a company will always say, we will give you both quality and quantity. And I don't know of anyone that's truly been able to do both to fill enough of anyone's, sort of demand. That slide wasn't there. And then I wish my French, were better because I wanted to hear about a lot of the conversations earlier. In the US, I would say that this has been something that's very well documented, very well tested. And it's a slightly sobering fact, and that is that in the U.S. in competitive markets, it really is in a traditional lead gen environment, in one where the form is filled out and an advertiser gets the form. It is all about how fast do you get to that customer and how fast, and sort of because it's all about what number are you, and getting a hold of them is impossible. And so it's always amazing when you'll hear companies. And I know, and this is one of those things about lead gen where it's so tough because an advertiser will say, and we all have this conversation nonstop. Your lead wasn't good. The seller will say, did you call it? Yes. When? Yesterday. You bought it a week ago. So? And so you have this constant sort of back and forth, and it takes really good dialogue, I think, to figure it out. And I'm incredibly hopeful. I love sharing stories of some of the bad things that happen, and I don't do that in a way to, again, I think for me it's about, we're all trying to do the same thing, which is, in the most case, it's how do we figure out how to grow each other's businesses under the constraints that we have. And what we saw with that chart is, I think in the last, I would say, year and a half, or maybe less, in the US lead gen market, we've really had a phenomenal shift from, and I believe this is what the Allo was also sort of talking about, is it's gone from fill out a form and then go to a call center and dial very fast to this idea of kind of click to call. And so this is by far one of the biggest transformations that's been happening in the US market, and it's not surprising that it is happening because of the fact that of the mobile phones and people having it with them. And what's also super exciting is this idea, and it goes back to sort of the funnel, where a lot of times there's so many new industries where it's really difficult, and it's interesting to hear how many sort of similarities there are and differences. For instance, in the US, there isn't this idea that the auto sort of dealer will buy the leads and then call on the leads and give it to the sort of to the dealer. There is no test drive mentality. It's still very much a sort of new car or used car, and it's the dealers who sort of learn to be very quick in sales and early adopters early on. But you still find those particular segments that are very difficult to sort of train that new behavior. So it's always exciting when we see a company that is sort of moving further down the line. And so one example, for instance, is MyTime, where they want to enable you to be able to truly book appointments and essentially map what we all want. If you are an actual customer, you want to be able to do this, but most businesses aren't going to have the tools in order to do it. And certainly in the US market, the lead generation has also been very hot from a sector from financial exits. So there have been, these are two particular ones that were recently, Lead Karma and Media Alpha. And so that's also incredibly exciting to see that the kind of the investor money is looking at this as solving needs and doing things that are actually really interesting. And sort of to that point, as some in this audience have probably already seen, we have companies that are in many ways continuing to evolve, but getting enormous valuations as a result. So Thumbtack in the US raised $100 million, and it's in the home services space, and it's valued at close to $1 billion. It's something that I think 4 years ago we would have thought it kind of never happened, but it just shows that sort of ability for lead gen to both help businesses, and when businesses start to figure out how do they work in a way that helps the company by for example, helping them get to appointments versus just selling them a lead. And so I think a small shameless plug for LeadsCon. But if you would like to meet a lot of these companies, I certainly invite everyone in this room to come to LeadsCon. And it's going to be in March in Las Vegas. I wish I could offer to fly everybody there, but I certainly hope that many of you will choose to sort of join us. And this slide is, as you may have already guessed, is sort of how LeadsCon has grown over the years. And so we've been incredibly fortunate that the community around lead generation has embraced sort of getting together. And it will be fun because we know that by this time next year, this sort of this venue will be way too small. And then in 4 or 5 years' times, the people who are here will be gathered in a small little private corner saying, oh, do you remember the first LeadCampus? Yes, it was, oh, those were the days. That was great. Didn't you like it when it was small? Yes. But this is so much fun. So. And so finally, sort of my two last points are, as I tried to summarize what we talked about, sort of first, and it's kind of from a buyer's perspective, and it's this idea that as the fragmentation and as there are more places for people to buy, sort of traffic, and as those ones get harder, I mean, you could write a book. I don't know how many people in here have used Facebook. How many people here have used Facebook custom audiences? So a few, and there's still many more. And I think the people who've used it could tell you that it's, besides being really good, it's also incredibly hard just to be really good at one channel. So it's very difficult when you're trying to master a whole bunch of other sort of channels. And then when those channels become difficult and really expensive, the people who are out there on sometimes it leads them to do things that to take risks that they may not should have otherwise. And then some balancing the kind of not necessarily bad, but truth with the optimism, which is also the truth. And I'm just excited at how much this industry as a whole is growing, and that every day it seems as if there's new segments, there's new buyers that are coming on, and yes, there's like new ways to reach them. So I think about, there was a French company I was chatting with Laurent and company before, and describing how one of my kind of favorite startups in the U.S. is a mobile app for home improvement that's all like photo based. And of course, there's already a French one that was probably founded before then. But it's just so cool when you think about that we're really in the business of connecting consumers and businesses, and how we can find interesting ways to do it. And so I guess as we think about getting back to the beginning, where it doesn't actually get easier over time, but I think the good news is that everyone in this room is going to continue to get better, and you're going to make this industry much stronger. And I really want to say thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jay. Any questions? Jay is here. If you want to know more about the US, les questions?
Where to eat in New
En
York?
anglais, en français,
Anything is, okay. So it's really interesting. No one has accurately documented the lead gen. Do you want to ask the question in French? Does it matter? No.
Some projects in the lead market.
Google's been an interesting. Google and their projects have been interesting. They tried to do a mortgage, sort of a mortgage model, and they ended up shutting it down. It was really interesting, and it was really scary for those in the mortgage market. You could actually do a search, and we think about that the quest for, and this is very true for lead gen, is it's sort of, I want to get your attention, I want to get you interested, and I want you to fill out your form. I want you to fill out this form. And so for the mortgage market, one of the best tactics was find out how much your home was worth. So an ad would say, what is your home worth? You'd click on it, and you'd fill out a form, and then it would turn you into a lead for refinance, even though you weren't thinking about it. So Google didn't like that behavior, and they said, we're going to try to match all of this data together and allow you to see what are the current rates. Or we think about Zillow as the same, but more on the mortgage side. And it just has not been in their, they've been able to manipulate data and get data together. That's amazing. They do this in the auto insurance market very well, but they just haven't been able to kind of go beyond manipulating the data. It just sounds like every time they try to do something that gets in the way of a per click or a tap, they end up sort of abandoning it, even though they, wouldn't. So the question was around sort of Bitcoin. I know not nearly as much as I would like to, and at least within the U.S., at least within the sort of the lead gen industry, I haven't heard anyone sort of really focusing on it as an option. I know on the e-commerce side we hear about it a little bit more and more, but in the lead gen side, it's still. If you have a great idea, I think you could probably do incredibly well with it.